basically. All right. Okay. All right, and because this going to put this up on YouTube, and so we're not going to have any song, and because song would we use YouTube songs, and we will have a problem with copyright and violations. So we can do it with the songs. Today we'll start a series. Because the issue that we're going to talk about in 1 Corinthians 8 is not just 8, is 8, 9, and 10, 11, and so it's quite a long passage. So we will, yeah, until 9 to 10, 8 to 10, no, 11 is probably something else. And so we're going to have at least 2 or 3 sessions on this. So then this has to do with food and sacrifice of idols, food offered to idols. Okay. Let me share a screenshot and okay, here. Oh, I got a bit of problem again. Half the thing not just now. It was okay now. You only see half, isn't it? Right?
2 lines only. 2 lines.
2 lines only, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not too sure what's happening again. And just now was okay. Now not okay. Never mind. Okay, and I can see what you are seeing. Not everybody is agreed exactly what the problem and Paul is addressing to this letter, and what exactly did the Corinthians and raise with Paul, and what is Paul actually saying, and how is Paul then addressing it? But we can look at certain things. And first of all, in let's see. Okay, in chapter 10, verse 1 to 22, he very, very clearly prohibits eating sacrificial food in the pagan temples in the presence of idol demons. And so chapter 10, verse 1 to 22, he very, very clearly says no eating of sacrificial food and food offered to idols at the pagan temples in the presence of idol temples. Okay. Then number 2, in chapter 10, verse 23, and to chapter 11, verse 1, he says that about the food and this temple food, and after they had then the temple service, the temple, then there's always more food than is consumed. They then sell this food in the marketplace. And here he says that, and as far as this food is concerned, you can eat it freely without any question of conscience, and don't ask questions. Now, this is different from what the Jewish community would then, okay, I need to put these controls away. And the Jewish community, non-Christian Jews, and there are very strict rules about this. And for Jews, and such meat in the marketplace, and they are not allowed to buy and to eat. Very, very much like and Muslims today, non-halal food, and you cannot eat, you cannot buy those food, and that is non-halal. And so in the pagan temple, in the pagan marketplace, and you cannot buy the meat. Usually it is the meat that is involved, not vegetables, not fruits. It's the meat, and that has been sacrificed and slaughtered. And so they have their own butchers, they have their own, and the Jewish community, and which is quite large. So economically, and it is possible for them to have their own economic sector. But the Christians in Corinth are probably a very small community, so it's unlikely that they will have this food and this resource. And maybe they are also, the relationship with non-Christian Jews is kind of troublesome, and so they would avoid Jews, and the Jews will look at them and won't sell to them anyway. So so they had a problem, and in that situation. And as far as Paul is concerned, the food and that temple food and that is sold in the marketplace, just buy and eat, and don't ask, don't raise questions. Okay, that's it really. Then number 3, third point here, and in chapter 9, verse 1 to 27, he offers a strong defense on his apostolic authority, with special emphasis on his apostolic freedom. So chapter 10, then he says, cannot go to temple, but the marketplace, sacrificial can eat. Then chapter 9, before chapter 10, he offers a strong defense of apostolic authority, then especially his freedom. The questions will be, how do these 3 relate to one another? Or do they relate at all? And then especially, how does chapter 8 fit into all this? So chapter 8 starts with, and as regards food offered, sacrifice to idols. And then he talks about chapter 8, and then chapter 9, chapter 10. How does it all fit together? And how are these questions and in turn related? And what were the Corinthians doing? And what are they asking or arguing in the letter to Paul? And this is the situation that we are confronted with. Okay. Before we read the text and go to the text, and the line of the presentation I'm following, and is from Gordon Fee, and who wrote his commentary on 1 Corinthians. And he has taken a new direction in this, and many are following him in that. Traditionally, the older view is that the church wrote to Paul and asked Paul a question about temple food that is sold in the marketplace. And so the main question is that, can they eat this temple food sold in the marketplace? Because the Jewish community says no. So, but as Christians, can or cannot. And that seems to be the sense that they have taken this problem. And so the Corinthian church had a problem about food sacrificed and sold in the marketplace, and can they eat that food? Gordon Fee particularly can point out, if that is the question, if that is the problem, it poses difficulties about how Paul approached that. A lot of things doesn't make sense, and why chapter 9 and why chapter 8 and what was all this? So he thinks that, and I think I'm agreed with him, and I'm persuaded. That is, says, and he argues that the problem is not, the main question is not marketplace, then food and temple food in the marketplace. That is not the main problem, and he deals with it because eventually he has to touch it, and so it comes as a kind of addendum, a kind of a footnote to his argumentations. The main problem he's facing with the Corinthians, and they're not asking the problem and about our situation. In fact, and as Fee reconstructs the situation, the Corinthians is and up in arms against Paul, and they are arguing as against Paul their right to go to temples and eat temple food. And before they became Christians, this was something that they did. And now they are Christians. They think that it is not a matter of concern for them to go back to the temple to eat food offered, because it is not a problem. They don't see a problem between going to temple, eating temple food, and as part of their Christian identity. The argument seems to be that the temple, then idols are not real, then there is no reality to this temple, then to these idols and temple, and many of these temple festivals and temple food are also social events, political events, and so if you are a part of a trade guild and you are part of somebody in the city, and you get invited to the temple feast, then why not? And is there a problem in doing that? Maybe a certain situation like this, and a Christian politician today, and can he go during Chinese New Year and go and officiate in the opening or in the what we call and opening ceremonies in the Chinese temple? I like to wonder whether then some of our Christian politicians like Hannah Yo and all that, it is okay to go to participate in the temple and be part of this, because you are a politician and you represent not only Christians, but you represent also non-Christians. Can you go or not? Does that compromise a Christian testimony? The Muslims sometimes seems to be a clearer way to do it, and they would not be invited in the first place, and they would not go. And the Muslim says, and they find that, and we already heard that they would say it's wrong to even greet Merry Christmas, and I think they will also say that it is wrong to say Gong Xi Fa Cai, and so that is probably some kind of a similar situation that we faced. So going to the temple in early Corinth is a social event, is what we call civic event, and then we need to know that eating of meat is some sort of a luxury to a certain extent, and most common people, especially the lower classes, lower income group, cannot buy meat and on their own, and they would eat fish. They might eat chicken, maybe, but meat, actual meat, particularly, and beef and mutton and pork, is sort of a luxury. And it is only the rich can afford it, and it's only the temples largely. If you have a rich friend, he might invite you to his house and have this meal. But if you do not, then temple food, which is also public events, So it is not there. There will be what we call VIPs. There will be people who will be specially then patrons, and but there will also be then a section for the common people to participate, and especially your patron god is being celebrated, and festival honoring the god of the city, the god of the guild, and so good food. So why not? Since idols are not real, why can't we Christians participate in what we have used to participate before? And Paul's argument, to kind of give a overview or so that you don't get confused with all the details, is that he says going to a temple, eating in the temple food is prohibited. It's wrong. You cannot do that. In chapter 10, he very specifically, very clearly says, no, you cannot that. And there are two reasons why he says that. Number one, which he dealt with chapter 8, is that going to the temple then would be then not acting in love to your weaker brother. And number two, going to the temple and to eat there is having fellowship with demons. Idols may not be real, but there is a spiritual dimension, and actually behind the idol is a demonic activity. So you cannot do that. So that seems to be the way that the argument for Paul is being conducted. But Paul is being the kind of person he is, and he doesn't attack the problem immediately. You challenge him, and he doesn't respond and says no. And he likes to deal with the assumptions. He likes to deal with the gospel. He likes to deal with the undergirding principles. He likes to unravel the wrong thinking and behind the Corinthians' argumentation. You say yes, you say no, and you just head on, and then you can argue and argue, and then you basically get nowhere. But Paul likes to, okay, this is what you're saying. Let's examine the basis and the principles and the reasons why then you are arguing for your position. So you'll find that Paul's response to the Corinthians is based or is conditioned by the way the Corinthians are arguing. So then, so it's not a kind of a straightforward, can we do this or can we not do it? And they are saying that we are doing this, and we heard that Paul, you are against this, and we don't agree with you. And who are you to tell us we cannot do? And by the way, where is your authority, and where is your? How can you tell us what we can do and what we cannot do? So, and that would account for chapter 9. And we can do this because we have knowledge. All right. So then let's see whether I get the whole thing up. Oh, this one I can get the whole thing up. I don't know why. I think Albert says too many updates, and maybe some of you have not updated, maybe it's affected, and I'm not too sure. Okay. All right. I see a black spot still there. Hope it goes away. All right, chapter 8. But I don't know why there's a bad spot over here. You see a black spot? right?
Yes, we saw the thing.
Yeah, I don't know how to get it. If I try to redo it, I may get more problems. So anyway, let's leave it at it. Say okay, cannot get it out. All right. So Paul writes now about food sacrificed to idols. Okay, in the Greek, it's just one word, and it is about idol things, and which is everybody understands it has to do with food sacrificed to idols. Now about this, then now concerning this, a new topic from chapter 7. Chapter 7 has dealt with do not touch woman, and chapter 8 now food sacrifice to idols. And Paul begins by quoting them. We know that we all possess knowledge. So you see the quotation marks in NIV, and it will indicate that this is probably their slogan. We all possess knowledge. We have knowledge. One of the things that the Corinthians really proud about is that they see themselves as knowledgeable people. Even in Paul's opening and remarks to the letter, then Paul thank God that they are not behind in knowledge, and they are gifted with knowledge. This is one of the gifts that they have received, and evidently the Corinthians value knowledge very highly, and a large part of their problem, and that as Paul sees, is that they predicate all their actions that they do, their behavior, on knowledge. And we possess knowledge. Therefore, we are doing what we are doing because we have this knowledge that idols are not real, okay? And we are not affected. Food doesn't affect, and food has nothing to do with our spirituality, okay? So this is the idea of knowledge. And Paul doesn't disagree with that, okay? And Paul doesn't disagree that they all have knowledge, although he will qualify it later on a bit and just a bit down. And but he put a kind of caveat. He says, okay, we know we all have knowledge, we all possess knowledge, but knowledge puffs up while love builds up. Okay, knowledge is good, but one of the problems of knowledge is that knowledge brings about pride. And knowledge is not a good basis for Christian behavior, especially with regards to other people. And the real thing has to do with love. I think it was last week or some time ago, I posted something on Facebook and it says, and this was from, I think, Charles Spurgeon, and quotation says, and wisdom is good, but patience is such much better. And someone posted, a friend posted, it says, no, he disagrees. He said wisdom is better than patience. And I had an extended discussion with the post and wisdom, knowledge, and some Christians, we must have knowledge. Knowledge is great, but one of the things about knowledge is that knowledge. I don't undermine the importance of knowledge. Many of you came to this Bible study because you want to have knowledge, you want to know more, and otherwise, why are you here? I think that there is a place for knowledge, but one of the problems of knowledge is that knowledge has this problem of making you proud. You have little knowledge, and then you think that you're better than others. You have knowledge, then you think that knowledge can help you have pull one over and someone else. More spiritual. Some people have the idea that the more knowledge I have, the more I know the Bible, the more I know proper biblical understanding, I'm a more spiritual Christian. Not really, actually. And the knowledge basically, and later on Paul and in 1 Corinthians 13, then it says that even of all knowledge, even our prophecies, if you don't have love, I'm nothing. And here he already starting to build that up. And so the basis of Christian behavior, a Christian approach to how we ought to act, is not based on knowledge, but it's based on love. Because they were saying, probably, and from what we read in verse 1, that knowledge builds up. When we have knowledge, we build up our Christian faith, we build up our spirituality, we build up. Paul book a little and okay, pin in the bed, that kind of a bubble. It says no, then knowledge puffs up. The thing that really builds up is love. Love is the one that builds up, not knowledge. Then verse 2, he says, those who think that they know something do not know as they ought to know, but whoever who loves God is known by God. This is a very interesting verse because this is the standard translation that is based on the standard Greek text. Gordon Fee wanted to argue that the word something is probably not original, and the word God or known by God is not original. Okay, and there are a couple of what we call manuscripts. Okay, do I have that up there? Okay, this is NIV note, and I think it's P46 and a papyri, an early manuscript. Another ancient witness, that's Clement and of Alexandria, think and have this, whoever think that they have knowledge do not know yet know as they ought to know, but whoever loves truly knows. Okay, and even though then that reading has not been accepted by most translators and most editors of the Greek New Testament, and Gordon Fee argued that it makes better sense. It is not that we know something that idols don't have, but the boast of the Corinthians that we have knowledge, we possess knowledge, and we think that we possess knowledge rather than we know something specifically. And well, you possess knowledge, you may not know everything. You do not know as you ought to know. But whoever loves, whoever loves God and is known by God, fine. And I think that nothing, but probably that's not what Paul is saying. Paul says, whoever, those who think that they know, those who think that they possess knowledge, those who think that they have knowledge, don't really know. But the one who loves knows, truly knows. So this is what, and this translation option, and so you have an NIV, you find that the footnote, you will see this, and the alternative translation. Whoever think they have knowledge do not yet know as they ought to know, but whoever loves truly knows. Okay, I think that's a better reading of the text, and NIV, and I think, and Gordon Fee is also part of the NIV translation team. He tried very hard, I think, to argue his view. I think he lost and his argument. And so what you have in the NIV is what we read. But I think the concession was probably made to him, and his alternate reading was given, and over there. You'll find that in the Greek text, point out those words are missing from two very important witnesses. One is a very ancient and Pauline manuscript, and the other one is a quotation from Clement of Alexandria. And Alexandria is one of the places where they have very, very good biblical scholarship in the early centuries. And so based on that, he wants to argue that the better reading is that those who think that they know have knowledge, do not really know as they ought to know, but those who know, who loves, and rather their knowledge and is known, or really knows, and okay, truly knows. Then this kind of aside, and now about food sacrificed to idols. So he did attack about the food of the idols. So he talked about the basics, knowledge. Then say now he comes back in verse 4. Now about eating and food sacrificed to idols. Okay, now coming back to this, we know that there's nothing, idol is nothing at all in the world. There's no objective reality to idols. As far as we're concerned, there is one God. There's only one God. There's no God but one. This is our Christian confession. Every Sunday in our church, HSC, we recite the Apostles' Creed. There's only one God, and the Muslims recite the creed. Their creed. There is only one God. There's only Allah, and in that, the Jews so the same thing. There's only one God. There are no other gods in this world. There are only one God, and that is a basic Christian creed. And we all know, and Paul doesn't agree with. He agrees with them. He's in agreement with them, and but how they use that is directly what we call the very opposite of how Paul would deal with that. Okay, and Paul is going to argue they use this creed and use this knowledge and use understanding in a very, very, very wrong way. Okay. Let's see. I don't have the time. Yeah, here. Okay. All right. I need to have. Okay. Now, so he kind of gave a concession here. Even if they are so-called gods, okay, even if they are. These gods are real, whether in heaven or whether on earth, and then quotation in a kind of parenthesis. Indeed, there are many gods and lords on earth, and he's talking about the statues. He's talking about the idols. He's talking about actual, and there are people that. You can go around Korean, you find all these temples, these statues, and all these things. And here is the phrase "many gods and many lords." This is peculiarly the Greco-Roman situation. The gods refer to the traditional Roman gods, traditional Greek gods. They are Athena, Apollo, Zeus, and these are the gods of the Greek pantheon. Lords are the newer deities, and Isis, and the Oriental gods, and they are imported from the East, from Egypt, from Syria, from Mesopotamia. These are given the title lords, and in the Roman world, in the Greek world, they are not referred to as gods, and they are referred to as lords. And so they are, in some sense, and in political sense, they are lesser deities. And so he's referring to this. Yeah, indeed. And there are many gods and there are many lords, and in Corinth, in Rome, and on earth, and in the city, you'll find that. And yet for us Christians, there's only one God. One God. And here is a basic and largely the Father, our Father. And this is going back to Jesus. And Jesus says, and when you pray, Abba, Father, from whom all things come. Okay, so the Christian confession, all things come, and for whom and all things exist, but he changed it and he personalizes it, and not just only what we call a kind of objective creed that all things come from him and all things belong to him and all things are for him, but he personalized it, from whom all things came, and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Kurios, Jesus Christ, from whom all things came and through whom we live. And definitely Paul is not talking about one God and one Lord as if there are two deities. And this is the early sentiment of what we call the understanding of the Trinity, that God and Lord is one, although it is not developed in what we call theologically and exhaustive way. And God, the Father, the Lord Jesus Christ, is part of Paul's faith and Christian's faith as believing in one God. And so, and for whom we lived, for whom we live, we all live for God the Father, for Lord Jesus Christ, and God created all things through Jesus Christ. And this is the Christian confession. And this is where we are. So he grants that this is the situation. We all agree. Yeah. We all agree there's only one God, there's only one Lord, there's only one, and we worship only one. And with the Jews and with the Muslims, we can affirm with them there is one God. Against the Jews, against the Muslims, they don't recognize Jesus as Lord. As far as they're concerned, Jesus is, and for the Jewish people, he was a good teacher, and the Muslims, he was a prophet, but lesser than maybe in some ways lesser than Muhammad, in some ways greater than Muhammad, but he's still not God, he's not Allah. And so they cannot accept the Trinity, and so they reject the second part of that confession. But for us Christians, there's one Lord, one God, one Lord. But then he says, not everyone possess this knowledge. This is a very important part of Paul's argument. And he begins to say, we all have this knowledge. And there is no idols, there are no lords. And now he says, not everyone possess this so-called knowledge. What he's actually saying is something like this, that some Christians may come to church and confess there's one God, one Lord, that Buddha is not real, then Guan Yin is not real, and all that. And intellectually, they can recite the creed and become Christian, because in order to become Christian, you have to do that. But emotionally and internally, they haven't really assimilated that. So for them, there are still gods and lords and idols and that are seen to be real. So even though Paul would argue there are no objective reality to these idols, they don't exist in reality, but they exist subjectively in some people's minds. As far as their minds are concerned, as far as the heart is concerned, as far as their life is concerned, subjectively, they see these gods and lords as real. So he says some people are still so accustomed to idols, so when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as being sacrificed to a god. And since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. Now, the word conscience here is a very interesting word and very difficult to really hide down. And the word conscience is probably used in a lot of different ways, and it is a much broader semantic range than we have. For us, conscience is the inner voice that tells us right and wrong. If we do something wrong, our conscience convicts us and pricks us. If we do something right, our conscience approves us. That is our understanding of conscience, and it's also the early Christians' understanding of conscience. But And conscience is more than that for in a lot of ways. And so Paul is not using that in that sense. He's talking about some kind of consciousness and moral consciousness or spiritual consciousness. And then the consciousness is weak. And in other words, their minds are that they're still accustomed to think that idols are real. And in that sense, that consciousness is weak. And therefore, when they eat this sacrificial food, they are condemned because they will feel that they are participating in the worship of these idols. And therefore, it is defiled. Okay, they say, and probably then whether it's a quotation or not quotation, there are no markers and that indicate Paul probably is quoting them and indirectly. And he said, but food doesn't bring us near to God, and we are no worse, and if we don't eat it, no better than if we do eat it, and food is really immaterial. Okay, and you're arguing the food really doesn't matter. And Paul agrees with that. And food in itself is neutral, and the food doesn't mix. There's nothing wrong with the food itself. Okay, but then in verse 9, he then qualifies that kind. But be careful, however, that exercise of your rights, your freedom. The Corinthians are saying that we have this knowledge, we have this, and so it gives us a right, it gives us a freedom, it gives us authority to eat this food. And so Paul says, if you exercise that, it's your rights, your freedom, and make sure that you exercise the right to not become a stumbling block to the weak. Another key word, stumbling block, and most of the time, I think I've heard people using stumbling block is to offense. You know, if you have a stumbling block to me, you offended me, you do something. It can mean that, but it is not what is meant here. All right, and the primary meaning of stumbling block is not offense. The primary meaning of stumbling block is a stumbling block, and you causes something that causes someone to fall. And so he explains that if someone with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in an idol's temple, and this is where I think Gordon Fee argues that the whole question has to do with eating food in the idol's temple. If someone with a weak conscience, moral consciousness, and spiritual consciousness sees you with all your knowledge eating in the idol's temple, won't that person be somehow emboldened and kind of encouraged, since you are a strong Christian, since you are able to do this, and nothing wrong with it. So, and what is sacrifice of idols? So this weak brother whose conscience is weak, whose moral conscience is weak, and this sister for whom, and when he emboldens, he is destroyed by your knowledge. And when he goes to the temple and eats, and he is thereby destroyed. This is not something that has to do with destroy. Is a very strong word. It is talking about loss of eternal salvation. I think Gordon Fee gives a very good example. There are some people, especially drug addicts or alcoholics, and when they are delivered from their drug addiction and from what we call addiction to alcohol, because of their ties, their what we call to alcohol or to drugs, and it is very dangerous for them to go back to those situations where they were caused to be drug addicts and to be alcoholics, and they had to cut off completely. So for many of these Christians and who were from pagan background, any small association, reassociation, going back to the former pagan background will cause them and to be compromised and to feel that they have backslidden and feel that they have fallen and will cause them to lose their faith. A very interesting example is like something like this. I know of many Christians, and who go on tours in China and in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Thailand. And when they go for this tour, there are some famous temples, there are some famous shrines, and they will not go in. They will say no. Because for them to go in, and their conscience will not allow them. Even though they know they are not real, they are not real, they are no real. And then for you to try to encourage them to go is very, very bad, very, very wrong. As a person who have never had this association with what we call, for me, going to the Buddhist temple, going to a Siamese temple, I don't feel any particularly problem going there. But for them to actually even go, but interestingly, these Christians have no problems going to Rome and going to Ephesus, going to Turkey, and going to Greek temples and Roman temples and the ruins. And some of them have problems and would not go, but most of them don't really, because there's no association with that. So this is, and the situation of Paul is same. If someone with a big conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in idol's temple, and won't that embolden that person to eat what is sacrificed to idols? And so this brother and this sister, not just one who has a weak conscience, but now he puts this brother or sister for whom Christ has died is now destroyed by your knowledge. So when you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience in this way, you not only sin against them, now he used language of sin. You sin against them, you sin against Christ. And then in conclusion, therefore, he says, and if what I eat causes my brother and sister to fall into sin, I will. Okay, sorry, bear me. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. If what I eat causes my brother and sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. It seems that the problem has to do with meat, and very interesting he uses that word. Actually, meat is sacrificial meat and meat that is slaughtered, and so I will not do that. And okay, so it would seems from this chapter 8 and how Paul deals with it. And he deals with the first reason why he will prohibit Christians from going to the temple to eat temple food. And even though the idols are not real, but some Christians still don't have this knowledge internally. In their heads, they may know that that the idols are not real, but in their past association, they are so, and they are weak in their moral consciousness, and to go is to defile themselves and to be destroyed spiritually. Paul says, if you do this, you are not acting in love. You are receiving a knowledge. Probably some of these Corinthians were saying to them, knowledge builds up. So then you need to build up and your faith, and so you need to go and to eat in the show that these temples and this food has not really any hold on you. And but Paul says, no, this doesn't really build up. See, because you may feel that you can do it, but when you force or when you encourage a weaker brother to do that, you actually does the opposite. You destroy that brother, you destroy that sister, and you sin against them, and you sin against Christ. So if my exercising of my rights and my freedom, my authority, and causes another brother to fall and lose the salvation, I will not do that. That's what he says. Okay. All right, and I will stop recording.